There's more on the line this Saturday in Eugene than just Big Ten championship and playoff implications. Jacob's reputation is on the line, and that is something we have to cross it over for.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yes, it is that time for a crossover edition of Locked On Ducks. I'm Spencer McLaughlin, and Locked On Hoosiers, he is Jacob Goins, and thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks or the Hoosiers, depending on which feed you're listening to or watching this show. We're going to get you set with what is on the line, the top questions for both teams going into the game day game in Eugene this Saturday afternoon kickoff on CBS. And Goins, Oregon fans are in many ways well-versed in your thoughts on this particular matchup. According to our friends at FanDuel, Oregon a 7.5 point favorite. That number's come down from what it was previously. But, you know, this game, I could very easily come on here and say, Dan Lanning needs this win to justify Penn State was a fraud, and look at what happened. I don't feel that way.
Somebody's saying that out there.
Somebody somewhere. So if you want to see it as silencing that particular segment of the college football fan base, fine. For Oregon, fundamentally in this game, though, you win this game, I don't think there's any way they can miss the playoff. I expected them to get there before the season. I expect them to get there even if they do lose this game. But you have a resume-boosting opportunity, a head-to-head with a team that could go to the Big Ten championship game this year for whatever that's worth. And I think for Oregon in this spot, it's another opportunity to go out, get better, get a big-time win at Autzen Stadium, and, I mean, frankly, just invigorate the fan base even more.
Well, look, I think for Oregon fans, I don't want them to look at Indiana as the Indiana of old, right? This is a legitimate top 10 team. They're an undefeated team, and Curt Cignetti's the real deal. If Indiana comes in and pulls off this upset, which clearly it would be, this shouldn't be, oh my God, Indiana upset. This is not a UCLA Penn State thing. This is just a really good football team coming to Autzen Stadium. Now, I do think Oregon clearly has more talent. They're at a higher spot with their program for a longer period of time, but Indiana has every chance to win this football game. The unfortunate part, though, Spencer, and I know you talk a lot about this on Locked On College Football, is the fact that a big-time regular season game like this, a top 10 matchup, yes, it's important, and yes, it has a lot of implications for the conference and the college football playoff, but, I mean, the loser's not out. The loser's not done. Yeah. The season's not over. Like, I'm not going as far to say the game doesn't matter, because that's clearly not true. But 10, 15 years ago, this game would have a lot more riding on it than it does this year in 2025. And that says more about college football than it does this matchup in itself.
Two years ago, this game would have had a lot more on the line. Because I'm with you.
Instead of 12, yeah.
Yeah, and I think maybe that's why, as I talked about yesterday on my show, I'm like pretty calm in the lead up to this game. It is, especially with the Penn State win. If Oregon had lost that game, then I think my nerves going into this one for Oregon would be significantly higher because the playoff stakes would be so much greater. And yeah, you get a resume ding when Penn State goes and loses to UCLA and justifiably falls out of the top 25. I think they'll probably find their way back in by the end of the season and be at least an 8, if not a 9-win team in the Big Ten. So I think that for Oregon here, it's exciting that you've got game day in town. It's exciting you get a chance to go and play a top 10 team, but yeah, I think that is part of the I honestly hadn't thought about that as much as I should have until you brought it up when
that's the unfortunate thing.
It is.
It sucks.
And I mean, on the one hand, it's great because you've got a margin for error as an Oregon fan and for an Indiana fan as well. That Illinois win is holding up well over time. We'll see how they do against Ohio State this weekend, but I think Illinois is a good team. I don't think they're great, but I do think they are good, and I gave Indiana their flowers for winning that one. But the loser of this game, especially if it's close, Jacob, if Oregon wins the game by a field goal or Indiana pulls the upset by a field goal, neither team's dropping out of the top 10. At least they shouldn't as a result.
Yeah, I mean, this would be considered a good loss, and I don't love using that term, but that's what this would be, I think, either way. And you're right. You're not going to get dinged for it. It's going to be a good game. The committee will look at this at the end and say, man, that was a great matchup. Now, If there's a blowout either way, that's a different conversation. And then you start looking at how did the team respond and bounce back. But yeah, as you were talking about Oregon, it's the same thing for the Hoosiers, right? A win over Illinois was nice, and surviving on the road at Iowa was nice. And you allow yourself to say, okay, now you have a chance to either win at Oregon or win at Penn State, which unfortunately, and I talked about this earlier on Locked On Hoosiers, it's the fact that Penn State game doesn't look like the resume builder that it once did if they were going to be a top 5 or top 10 team. Still a tough place to play, still a solid team, but this is Indiana's last big opportunity to show the playoff committee that they're legit, to show that they are truly a top 10 team and can beat a program like Oregon, because last year, we know, you went on the road to Ohio State, didn't get it done, and then you went on the road to Notre Dame in the college football playoff, and you didn't get that done either. So with Penn State clearly taking a step back, and teams like Michigan State and UCLA, Maryland's on that schedule for the Hoosiers. I'm not overlooking that game. But in terms of the playoff for this matchup on Saturday, this is Indiana's last big chance to prove themselves, and I'm really excited. I think the Hoosiers will play well.
I wonder how much Indiana is still trying to win over the reputation battle with the playoff committee, because
they are. Yeah.
Last year, I think going into this game, there's more on the line for Curt Cignetti than Dan Lanning, because Cignetti's got the win over Illinois. That's a good win because of the manner in which you did it. Even if you'd won close, it would have been a good win to beat a preseason top 12 team, but that you just destroyed them is a big time statement sort of moment. Beating Oregon would be different, though. That I think would send Indiana into, oh, wait, this is now, a tier 1 looking program in all of college football, where Oregon that just won the Big Ten and is a national title contender once again. Whereas for the Ducks in this spot, Dan Lanning has racked up a signature win each of the last 2 years. It was Ohio State in 2024, Penn State this year. I don't think he's fighting that battle. I don't think you see, any sort of narrative out there in the college football world that, well, Dan Lanning's got to win the big game. No, Dan Lanning's won a bunch of big games. Big Ten championship, Ohio State, Penn State again on the road, where everything was kind of working against him on paper there. I think for Cignetti, there's a certain level of respect, but I bet if you polled, really anybody in the national college football landscape, they would rank Dan Lanning ahead of Curt Cignetti as a coach. And I think a matchup like this is a big reason why. And I think if Lanning wins, it's another feather in his cap. But for Cignetti, if he wins, it's a new feather in his cap as a college football coach.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. I mean, Dan Lanning in any particular game in a one-off situation, in my opinion, has nothing to prove. He's pretty much done it other than winning a national title, right?
That's literally the only thing.
That's the only thing. But in a one-off situation on a Saturday afternoon, he has nothing to prove. He has nothing to show. He has no other, echelon to reach. I mean, he's basically done it all in that landscape. And you're exactly right about Curt Cignetti. He is slowly building towards that, right? Last year, Indiana beat the teams they were supposed to beat, and you lost to the 2 teams that were better than you. This year, you beat Illinois, who was top 10 at the time. You went on the road to beat Iowa, and now you have this opportunity here. If you get it done, everybody has to swallow their pride and say, all right, I guess Curt Cignetti and Indiana are kind of legit. But if you don't, you still have a chance to make up for it. You still have a chance to compete in the Big Ten and make the college football playoff. But you're exactly right. I agree. There's more, at least from a reputation standpoint, there's more up for grabs for Curt Cignetti than Dan Lanning on Saturday for sure.
Yeah, and I think it'll be a really fun, entertaining game. And I do think that this is a legitimate measuring stick moment again for Oregon, because I think Indiana is really good. Some people's top 25, mine, have Indiana inside the top 5, because I think Illinois is a good team, not a great team. Beat them 63-10. That was darn impressive. But no team is perfect. Everybody's got concerns. We'll go over Oregon's top concerns, Indiana's top concerns ahead of the Game Day Top 10 showdown as we continue with our crossover edition of Locked On Ducks and Locked On Hoosiers. First, this episode brought to you by our friends at Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride, with more IIHS Top Safety Pick awards than anyone else as of August 2025. From footwork to breathwork, athletes are sweating all the details, and Mazda brings the same intention to how they craft every model. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but. From smooth handling to intuitive controls, Mazda's got it all. With all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season, and winter's right around the corner. That is about to matter a lot. Like the players of your favorite team, Mazda sweats every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. That's how Indiana's thinking. Not impossible. They win this game. Even if it were, that'd be irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. This episode also brought to you by our friends at Monarch Money. Most people can't name their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, well, you end up leaving money on the table. That is where Monarch Money comes in. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives like myself or Jacob or most of you out there, I'm sure. If you've put off organizing your finances, Monarch is here to help. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get a smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel like you're in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. 50% off. That's pretty good. 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with the code LOCKEDONCollege. Check them out at monarchmoney.com.
We're back here on a Locked On crossover of Hoosiers and Ducks. I'm Jacob Goins of Locked On Hoosiers. He is Spencer McLaughlin of Locked On Ducks. And we got some questions about this Oregon team because, look, Spencer, I have my own questions about Oregon, and I put those out on the internet, and some people liked them, some people did not, about has Oregon been tested enough going into this game? Because as fun as it probably was for you guys to beat Oklahoma State, Oregon State, and Northwestern, I'm sorry, I just can't. I can't give you the credit that you want for beating those teams. Going on the road to Happy Valley is exciting, but then they lose to winless UCLA, and it's just it gets kind of murky. So, are the Ducks ready? Are the Ducks tested? Are the Ducks going to be able to get up for a game like this, where it is a top 10 matchup? It is at home. College GameDay's there. I'm not questioning Dan Lanning. It's more so of the guys that he's going to be coaching. Can they be ready for a matchup like this? Because Indiana will be.
Yeah, I don't know that this concern is inside of my top 5 or 10 or even 20 for the Ducks going into this game. Will Dan Lanning have them ready to go? You know, the games that Oregon has lost during Lanning's tenure, the only one where they didn't look ready to play was his very first game against Georgia, and that was just never going to be a victory anyway. It was worse than it should have been, but quite frankly, that's the only time you can say, wow, Oregon just wasn't ready to go in a big game. You look at Ohio State last year, and they started well on offense. They had an early interception on defense that the officials screwed up. You look at the Big Ten championship game. They had a 28-10 lead. You look at Penn State last year. Offense definitely sluggish against against a talented Penn State defense that didn't play great last week. And I will continue to reinforce this idea because I do firmly believe it. Oregon broke Penn State's will to play. James Franklin has all but admitted that publicly, saying, yeah, we didn't respond to the Oregon loss very well. Yeah, that comes down to the head coach. But, you know, a point, and I get why the Hoosiers fans look at Penn State and say, oh, look, they were that. It came down to coaching end of the day, and also realize that Penn State, that's come up so close and yet so far in those big games, was one play. They were one play from winning the football game. They had a touchdown lead in overtime, and Oregon was faced with a 4th and 1 after a non-targeting call that made me again question why we have this rule in college football at all.
Yeah, that was wild.
It was wild.
I mean, is that the one where they said he hit him with the hairline?
The hairline. Yeah, you got him with the hairline. I'm like, wait, what happened to forcible contact to the head or neck area?
Hairlines, but,
yeah,
it's fine.
Yeah. Doing his best LeBron impression over here. But, you know, I just look at what happened in that game, and I understand why it would be emotionally crushing. And it's not that Penn State can't get back, but, you know, a point I've made about Penn State this week is the quality of that roster didn't change. The quality of their preparedness did. And execution, that did change. And I think that went to their mental wherewithal. If you gave a better head coach that Penn State roster and that staff, Penn State would be a much better football team that beats Oregon and doesn't have any problem with UCLA. So, no, I don't think that there's a worry in my mind. Frankly, I wonder if Lanning uses that as motivation this week, if he doesn't compile some clips of people saying, oh, see, Penn State were frauds. You got to prove. Hey,
I heard he's watching Locked On Hoosiers this week.
That's
what I've been told.
You should make that a goal this week, Jacob. Get clipped into Ducks versus them at the end for a motivational piece of information for the Oregon football team. That would be pretty awesome, frankly. But
yeah, that'd be sweet.
But yeah, so on the question of do I wonder whether Oregon, is going to be ready? No, because what you mentioned earlier with Lanning, I think does permeate with the players mentally throughout the program, which is, they still haven't won that national championship, and that's all that's left. I don't think that, Florida State peaked against Alabama earlier this year. They're not a bad team, but they're not a great team. They're fine, but they peaked this year because they were trying to accomplish goals that are much smaller than what Oregon has. I don't think a single guy in that locker room is going to come out satisfied, complacent, content, anything like that until Oregon hoists that trophy at the end of the season.
Well, what's so fascinating about this matchup, and we'll talk about the Indiana perspective in our last segment, but the fact that both teams are coming off a bye, right? I mean, it's a top 10 matchup where both teams had the extra week to prepare. And you're talking about two of the best coaches in the game when it comes to game planning, preparation, and then in-game adjustments when necessary with Dan Lanning and Curt Cignetti. And one thing I've noticed about the Oregon offense is the balance that they have between passing and rushing, whether it's Dante Moore using his arm or the army of backs that Oregon is using on the ground. Do you believe that they'll stick with that, or if they find something to be successful, they'll just hammer that against this Indiana defense, which is still underrated? People still don't want to talk about Brian Haynes as one of the best DCs in the Big Ten and in college football, and he's going to come after Dante Moore, who has looked so good so far this year, Spencer.
He has, and I think the balance is a big reason why. If Oregon finds something that works, that they're not going away from it. I just think that this offense is in many ways rinse and repeat with regards to what they do on Saturdays, because it might look a little different each week, but fundamentally they're trying to accomplish the same sorts of goals. Get Dante Moore settled into the game early, have the ability to take some shots down the field, use the RPO game and all of that. And I think that Will Stein was really good, frankly, on September 27th in Happy Valley, the last time we saw this Oregon team play, because you look up and, only 17 points in regulation. Well, Jim Knowles is really good, and Penn State's defense is really talented, and they were at home, and they were off a bye. Like, all those advantages went in Penn State's favor, and you look up, and why did Oregon win the game? Because they were 5 of 7 on fourth down, and you can't do anything but give a lot of credit to the OC in a spot like that. So, yeah, I think that Oregon's balance has been their best weapon. Like, Dante Moore's passing numbers are really good. They're not, going to set any records.
I mean, 14-1 on the touchdown interception ratio.
Yeah, it's great. It's why
that's incredible.
Yeah, that's why he's the betting favorite to win the Heisman, combined with the fact that Oregon won one of the games of the year at Penn State, and that, Dante Moore was a big reason why. And you can't overlook his legs in the conversation. It's not a primary feature, but he can certainly do it. We saw that against Penn State quite a bit. But, I think that for Dante Moore, like, he more than anything looks like a even better. I'm trying to figure out how best to phrase this.
Who do you want to compare him to? Who do
Bo
you want
Nix.
to compare him to? Okay.
Statistically, he doesn't look like he's on track at the moment to put up the numbers that Bo Nix did. Bo Nix in that 23 season ended with like over 4,500 yards passing.
He may not have to, though.
That's the thing. But what made Bo Nix so good in this offense was his ability to make good reads and make high-level throws, but just execute. Execute over and over. That's what Dante Moore is doing. And the reason I say, even though the numbers might not be there, he looks better, Dante Moore can make throws that neither Bo Nix or Dylan Gabriel consistently made. Gabriel in particular, Bo Nix has a better arm, but hey, they're both starting NFL quarterbacks right now. Shout out Dylan Gabriel. Too bad he's on the Browns. But I think that Dante Moore still has another gear, and that's being more consistently explosive in the pass game. But, when you go up against good defenses, turns out it's going to be tougher to take those sorts of shots down the field. So long-winded way of saying that, I feel good about Oregon's offense, where they're at going into this game. And I think the balance of weapons, the number of different ways they can beat you, something Joel Klatt talks about a lot that I like hearing, they've got answers. They can run it. Yeah. They can create explosive runs. That was a problem last year. They've done that very well this season. They can throw down the field, intermediate, short passing game, screen game. Like, there's nothing really that they've shown they can't do. So with him at the controls, yeah, it's hard to not feel good about this Oregon offense.
And you can't deny that he can play at home or on the road. Winning in Happy Valley this game, of course, being in Eugene, that would be a concern, but he's going to be in front of his home fans and they're going to be going crazy. Those could be concerns for Indiana going on the road yet again to their toughest environment so far. Spencer's going to talk to me and ask me concerns about the Indiana Hoosiers, and I'll tell you why they're going to pull off the upset. We do that next here on this Locked On Crossover.
First, this episode brought to you by PrizePicks. Every day we make decisions, but on PrizePicks, being right can actually get you paid. Don't miss the excitement of this football season with PrizePicks, where it's good to be right. Playing PrizePicks is a fun, simple way to add more excitement to football. You just pick more or less on player projections like Josh Allen's passing yards or Saquon Barkley's rushing yards, Jamar Chase's receiving yards, whatever you're feeling. If you think you know how it's all playing out, PrizePicks is the place to put your knowledge to the test. And just like that, you're in the game. It's really simple. You can make your lineup in under a minute. And if you want to ride with a player, you can select their pass yards, rush yards, touchdowns, all in one lineup. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. It's good to be right. Jacob, do you dive into history at all? Do you dabble?
A little bit.
A little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
You know what happened the last time Fernando Mendoza came to Autzen Stadium with a bit of a drizzle in the forecast? It never rains at Autzen Stadium, but it drizzles. Yeah. You know what happened last time?
We don't have to talk about it.
We don't have to. We could, but I'm actually going to save that one. I'm going to let that just marinate in people's mind. Yeah, I'm going to let that one marinate for the next question. Because the one at the top of my mind for Indiana is the offensive line. The biggest difference between the Iowa game and the Illinois game was the play up front, particularly not that Indiana's defense was bad. Of course they weren't. It gave up 13 points even against Iowa. Like, I agree. Indiana's defense is an underrated unit in college football. And I talked about that yesterday on my show. But the Indiana offensive line took a step back, and this Oregon defensive line is nasty. They are deep. They are talented. They have played really well. They were brilliant against Penn State. How do you feel about that matchup?
I think you're spot on. The fact that was one of the takeaways from the Illinois game was the trenches on both sides. We've known that Indiana's defensive line is extremely talented with guys like Michael Kamara who are going to be playing on Sundays. But the question coming into 2025 was, okay, can the offensive line hang around? Can they compete, especially in the Big Ten? They did against Illinois, and I thought, cool, problem solved. Everything's going to be fine. If you can hang with Illinois, you'll hang with Oregon, Penn State, and whoever else you play. But you're exactly right. The Iowa game, I don't want to say disappointing, but it was alarming if there's a difference there, because you look ahead to Oregon this weekend, to Penn State in a few weeks, and some sneaky defensive fronts in there like a Wisconsin as well, who I know they're bad, but their defensive line is still good. That is concerning for me. And I think what that means is Indiana's offense is going to have to find a way to not put Mendoza in harm's way, because he's been sacked 5 times this year, which isn't all that bad, but Oregon's going to bring the pressure, and they're going to bring it in several different ways. That's what makes this defense unique, is they disguise things. They come at you from different angles. And look, Mendoza's got to find a way to get the football out and get it out quicker, right? He has a pretty good clock. There's a reason that he has odds to be not just a first-round pick, Spencer, not just the first quarterback taken. There are odds for him to be the number 1 overall pick in next year's NFL draft.
Not if Dante Moore comes out.
He's not coming out. No way.
I mean, I hope not, but goodness gracious, man. Watch him play football. The arm talent's crazy.
I agree. He's been impressive. Look, he's a 14-1 touchdown to interception ratio. Fernando Mendoza, 16-1. Just throwing that out there. But that's what the Indiana offense is going to have to do, is get away from the talented Oregon defensive line. Don't give them a chance to impact this football game, and you do that by running the ball. And Indiana's got 2 guys in Roman Hemby and Kalen Black who are just uber talented and get downhill and get chunk yardages. They have the big play potential, but it's the idea that they can break off 4, 5, 6-yard runs just about every time. And you know this, Spencer. You run the ball on the road, it opens up the passing game. And when Mendoza drops back and has just a little sliver of time, he's going to make the right decisions. And he's got guys like Elijah Surratt, Omar Cooper, those type. EJ Williams has stepped up as well. Those are guys who, once they get the football in their hands, they'll make plays. They'll get yards and they'll move the chains for you. But Indiana can't drop back 50 times in this game and expect the offensive line to hold up, because against that Oregon D-line, they simply won't be able to do it.
Now, here's the interesting thing about the last time Mendoza came to Autzen. And yes, Indiana fans, I'm not going to troll you to the extent and say that Cal team was the same as this Indiana team.
They
Definitely,
were bad.
Yeah, they were not. They were not very good. Is Justin Wilcox still the coach? Yeah, he is.
Yeah, but new offensive coordinator now, man. Brian Harsin is the offensive coordinator.
Brian Harsin is the offensive coordinator. Speaking of great quarterbacks, by the way, that'll get drafted one day. Jaren Kiave Sangopolotele. Whew.
Nice. You just want to say it. You just want to say his name.
That dude can ball. I did work on it a lot because he was a one-time Oregon commit. Anyway, so here's the interesting thing. You mentioned Mendoza getting the ball out of his hands. And when Mendoza came to Autzen against Oregon in 2023, I don't think that defense was as good or as talented as this one. It was a good unit, though. They actually only sacked Mendoza one time, and that Cal offensive line really, really struggled. And of course, new players, but same defensive system with Dan Lanning and defensive coordinator Tosh Lupoi. Mendoza only being sacked one time, I think could come to fruition on Saturday. Here's what I'm interested in, though. That Cal offense also used a lot of RPO, like Indiana, and I think the Hoosiers are leaning into Mendoza's strengths. He's very good in that part of the field, or in that part of the game, rather.
Right.
But Oregon, in that matchup, held Mendoza to 18 of 34 passing for 177 yards, no touchdowns, and a pick. And they had some decent receivers on that Cal team. They had 7 pass breakups, though. Here's the interesting thing. 3 of those 7 pass breakups were by defensive linemen. The havoc that Oregon caused in that game wasn't reflected in the sack total, but it was reflected by, and Mendoza fumbled in that game as well. That's where it showed up. I'm interested to see when you know that you've got, I think Indiana can throw the ball down the field. I've watched them do it this year. I think they're most dangerous when they hit those RPO glance routes. Like, Mendoza is so accurate. His receivers don't have to break stride. He's really good at generating yards after the catch in those plays. I think that tactical matchup is fascinating. How does Oregon try and disrupt Mendoza? Are they going to try and bring pressure, or are they going to tell their defensive linemen all week to do what Penn State and Ohio State did against Dillon Gabriel in the last 2 games last year, which is, hey, you're not going to get home. If you don't get home in half a second, get your hands up and knock the ball out of the air.
It's a great point. And that's something that hopefully Indiana is prepared for. Good news is Mendoza works outside of the pocket really, really well. He's not somebody that has to be in one spot, plant his feet and let the ball fly. He can throw on the run. He will move out of the way and is able to make throws and make plays with his legs too. Underrated runner. Sometimes he takes off and I don't want him to, and took a couple nasty hits in that Iowa game. He's tough, man, but he's got to be careful and got to be smart. But he can make those plays with his legs when needed. But I'll remind people, he may not have won that game at Autzen Stadium when he was the quarterback at California, but he did go on the road to an SEC team and get a win last year as the quarterback at California. So if you can go on the road and win a game,
that was Auburn. Does that even count? Does that even count?
It's a road game in the SEC, man. If you can win a game like that, you can win a game in Autzen, and this team is much better with Indiana than that California team was. And Mendoza's a baller, man. He is, I'm not saying everything for this Indiana team, but I said it preseason. This Indiana football squad will go as far as Mendoza takes them. And you can say that about a lot of quarterbacks in college football, but it's especially true with a guy who's in the Heisman race right now, and again, could be a number 1 overall pick next season. So Mendoza's going to have a ton of pressure, and I expect Oregon to get after him all day long, but all you got to do is move the football, don't turn it over, and just convert when you have opportunities.
Who's the is he the betting favorite for the Heisman right now?
He will be after this weekend.
So not right now, though?
He was. He was at
but
one
not
time.
not right now. Any idea who?
I haven't checked today. I'll get back.
Yeah, you haven't checked. You know, that's okay. We got a minute here. I can pull it up, courtesy of our friends at FanDuel, of course. Let me just go over.
Let me pull up something else while you're doing
Heisman.
that.
Oh wow, look at that. Dante Moore's first. Look, I didn't even expect Dante Moore to be there, but that's how well Oregon's quarterback is playing. Who?
Number 1 overall pick, Fernando Mendoza, still has the best odds to be there. Just saying. The number 1 overall pick.
That boggles the mind. Okay, anyway, we'll end today's crossover there. We will do another one on Friday, get you our previews, predictions, matchups, all that sort of stuff. He's Jacob Goins, Locked On Hoosiers. I'm Spencer McLaughlin, Locked On Ducks. Appreciate everyone listening. We will see you next time. And until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.